Hey, badass black girls, and they making big moves. Hey, badass black girls, nothing that you can't do. They are the future, I'm trying to tell ya. They want the best, no time to settle. They got the strength to handle the pressure. These are the queens, nobody better. Yeah, changing the narrative, that is imperative. They about to rock this. Tell the women that you got this. Got no time for people who are toxic. It's all love, good vibes. You know I got your back, girl. Talking issues that matter. This is badass black girl, yeah.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here and welcome to a new episode of Badass Black Girl. We have the ultimate Badass Black Girl with us today. Genie is in the house. Hi, Genie.
Hello.
Genie, some people don't know you. Shame on them. Uh, because you're definitely someone that everyone should know. Well, I'm just kidding when I say shame on them, but really, you should know Genie. Go and find out about a podcast. She's going to introduce herself just so you get the picture. Then we'll talk about what she does, and we will get all excited because she does a lot and she's one powerful, badass woman. So, Jeannie, would you introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Thank you. So I'm Genie Dawkins, and I am a mother of 4 kids who are neurodiverse. And because of my struggles with getting my children diagnosed and dealing with my guilt as a parent, I decided to go into the service of others and other parents like myself. So I'm an author. I write books to support parents with special needs kids in their journey. I am an international speaker. I have a podcast called The Parenting Cipher, which is an international podcast. It is awesome. And we talk about parenting. We talk about advocacy, special education, entrepreneurship, the pieces that you need as a parent in general, but especially if you have a special needs child. One of the things that's missing the most, especially for people of color, is that we don't have the resources. It's more like someone says, hey, your child has ADHD. Okay, here is, the school's going to give you an individual education plan. Here you go. And your experience is, oh, well, I don't have to do anything. You're gonna help my child succeed, but it's not like that, and you don't know. So you sign something, your child's not making progress. For some parents, their child goes all the way to high school, and it's time for them to graduate, and the school's like, hey, here's your certificate. Can my child go to get a job with a certificate? No. Can my child go to college with a certificate? No. And as a parent, you have this moment of, what the heck just happened? Because I trusted you. So in the Parenting Cipher, I create a space where you get to hear not just professionals, but you get to hear other parents. My son is he's a guest all the time, right? So he comes in and he brings in his point of view, because one of the things that I like to create is connections with your child. So it's a journey for everyone. It's not the space of, my child has this diagnosis and I don't know what to do. Your child has a diagnosis and they're isolated because they have something. We're not having conversations about, hey, like for my son, like, hey, Zay, do you know you have autism? No one's having those conversations with kids. So all they know is that they're different. And they start to isolate, or they're different. And the school may say something like, okay, one of the accommodations is, if your child can't do the assignment with their other kids, we're going to give them a box so they can go sit in the corner and work by themselves. Well, on the one hand, if you're a parent, you don't know what that means. You're kind of like, that's a good thing. It's not a good thing, because your child is being isolated because they don't know. So instead of you taking the time to work with them one-on-one, you're pushing them to the side. So my son comes on and he tells you his point of view, right? And also it creates this connection. And I also have a journal, and it's called a Joyful Family Planner. What's cool about the journal is that I was so overwhelmed at one point. And when I say overwhelmed, my kids were going to regular school. Every Friday, I was in a therapist's office from 3 to 6, On Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, we were going to a reading specialist, like 15 miles from our house. And this was my daily, like every week, this is what I was doing because I was playing catch up. By the time my son had been diagnosed, he was depressed. He wasn't talking to anyone. He wasn't talking to kids. He wasn't talking to teachers. So by the time I had him tested, and I sat there in that meeting and they told me, well, he's 2 years behind. And even with our plan, he's always going to be 2 years behind. And they said it as like, oh, this is a given. This is a fact. And I sat there and I was like, oh, this is not acceptable. So what can I do? So this is the moment where my journey was so funky. I was like, no, parents should never have to do this. First of all, as a parent of color, you shouldn't have to fight to get your child tested because you don't know what to ask for. Like that's what got me was I kept saying with my daughter, I kept saying, I think something's wrong. And she was going to a top tier private school because that's the other thing I do. I get all my kids in private school for free. That's my thing. That's my gift. Okay. But I kept asking them, I was like, I think something's not right. Is there anything that I could do? And they would tell me it was developmental. So that from 3rd grade to 8th grade, it was always developmental. She became depressed. They were like, we're not offering her a high school seat because she is intellectually capable, but we don't see it in her work and we don't understand why. So they got her tested as a goodbye gift. My daughter has ADHD and she has dysgraphia. So I did not know because I kept saying I thought something was wrong. I didn't say, is there a test that can happen for my child? I didn't say those things. So it's that space of like, you don't know, you're not in a conversation. That's why I created Decipher. So even if you don't have a special needs child, you can hear other people's stories. It's important. You're not alone in your experience. You're just isolated because and as for people of color, like when the whole mental health and special needs conversation is new to us. It's not something where we're shy away from it anymore, but some of us do because it's a label. And historically, we shy away from labels because it's something else that's going to be held against us. So even with that being said, I had a client who actually talked her son out of getting tested. She talked him out of getting tested. Yes. She talked her son out of getting tested. And she was like, nothing's wrong with him. All he needs to do is focus. But here's the thing. I like to tell people all the time, we're scared that our child's going to be labeled. But here's the thing. They're already labeled. And if they do not have an IEP, an individual education plan in place, they're not protected. So what happens is your child becomes a behavior problem. Every time something happens, they're labeling as a behavior problem. And what's the lesser of the two evils? To have something that's going to document to say, okay, my child doesn't have a behavior problem. They have ADHD or they have autism. And even with that being said, either way, you're always going to have to advocate for your child, especially if you're Black, point blank, period. Point blank, period. The way the rules and regulations are, your child is supposed to get what they need to access education, most definitely. But then you also always have this piece of these numbers and data that they use for our little Black kids. And they substantiate that data by saying that they don't need a thing. So for instance, I did this study. Look, I go hard in the paint for my kids. Okay. So when I realized they were not going to be able to create a program for my son to catch up, I went and started to research what programs worked. But I also researched the programs that they were using in the school. I was trying to figure out why they weren't working. So in most inner city schools, when they have or place your child in a reading intervention program, they're using a program that is Orton Gillingham based, which is a program that's created for children who have dyslexia. So let's think about this. They put your child in a reading intervention program that is based on a dyslexic diagnosis, but they never test your child for dyslexia. So let's say you have 10 kids in a classroom. They never test them, but they're using this program. The program itself may be the child needs to do the program 30 minutes, 5 days a week for it to be successful. But instead, they're like, this child's not dyslexic. We're only going to give them the program 10 minutes a day, twice a week. Is it going to work? Right?
That's crazy to even think about.
Right. Is it going to work? So now, say you have those 10 children in the classroom. They didn't test them. They're using a dyslexic-based program. You're not even using it all the way. So out of those 10 kids that you never tested, 5 of those kids may be true dyslexic. Is the reading intervention going to work? It's not. And then we also have to take consideration of how America works. Nothing's broken, and I use that term very loosely. This is something I always tell my parents. Don't look at things as don't look at your child as though they're broken. But the way Americans' education system and a lot of things that we do in America is based is nothing is broken or nothing needs to be fixed until your child fails. But why does a child have to experience failure for you to help them? Why does your child have to be depressed, withdrawn, feeling less than for you to recognize that they need help? Why does a parent who sees that their child needs help, when they ask you, why do they have to fight? I literally had to sit there and tell them, his father is bipolar and ADHD. His sister has dysgraphia and ADHD. His brother has dyscalculia. Why do I have to sit there and tell you my whole family's history for you to understand that he needs to be tested when he's 2 years behind? You know?
So someone obviously is not doing their job.
So we know it's a system, Jay. It's a system. So what's supposed to happen is you have a special education coordinator and you have your teachers. If it was a perfect system, the teachers are supposed to be aware that something is off. You know, they're supposed to report it to the special education coordinator who contacts the parent. Special education coordinator, it works as an intermediary between the parents and the teachers. And for all intents and purposes, they are supposed to be the advocate. But what ends up happening is it's a system. It's like all of our systems. So what happens is when they create these IEP plans, they're cookie cutter. Even though it is individual education plan, that's not how they make them. They have these prefab goals, and those are the ones that they want to give your child.
Yeah, there's a checklist.
There's a checklist. They want to check the list. Even to the point when I got my son's test scores, I went through them, highlighted all the low scores. I call people. That's who I am. I'm a researcher. That's why I offer the services to parents, because they don't have time for that. I call psychologists. I called therapists and I spoke to them, and they would tell me and they would give me the language. That's the most important piece that we miss in any occupation, in any field, is language. So the first thing one lady told me, she was like, it says that he has a specific reading disorder. She was like, that's dyslexia. She was like, when you go in there, you let them know that you know it's dyslexia. She says, because they changed the term because dyslexia has built up this solid foundation of advocacy. Mm-hmm. But she was like, when you go in there, you make them use that term. She says, because it'll turn the tide for you. So I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't spoken to her. So what became very clear with the meeting with my son was, even though I'm just a parent and we have the special education coordinator who is an advocate, you have the special education teacher who that's what they went to school for. I knew more about my son's diagnosis than everyone in the room within a week, because that's how important it was for me. And when I tried to tell them, I was like, well, yes, this acknowledges dyslexia. And the special education teacher told me, well, dyslexia is just reading letters backwards. I said, no, it's not. I said, there's different levels of dyslexia. You have stealth dyslexia. You have the dyslexia where it's based on your optical, where that's where you see the reversal. And then she just looked at me and was like, oh, I didn't know that. And that's something that I want parents to understand. The reason why I created the podcast is so you can hear it. So I have, speech therapists on the show. I have people like yourself on the show, how to raise your confident child. I have therapists on the show. I have other parents on the show so that you can hear it without having to sit and read a book. It's a lot, unless that's your wheelhouse. I like to research. So it doesn't take a lot for me to consume information. But if you have the verbiage, so you listen to my show and you hear me tell you, when you go to an IEP meeting, you don't step into your space without a binder. This is what you have to have in your binder. You always, I don't care if you have a special needs kid or not, you should never go to a meeting with more than one person in a school setting without someone with you. And the reason why I'm telling everyone this is because the main thing that makes you a strong advocate beyond passion is confidence. Confident, you being confident, and you come in that space and you own it. But the one thing is, it's like, not saying school systems are enemies, but one thing is, when you do not know the verbiage, this is not your wheelhouse, and you step into someone else's house and they start to ask you questions and it starts to knock your confidence, you start to back down. Always take somebody with you, because at least you have some kind of validation when you hear something crazy and you're like, did you hear that? Or when you start to back down, they're like, hey, they intervene. And when I first started, that's how I started. I started talking to parents and I started just going to meetings with them. And one of the constant and consistent things I saw for Black women was, when they would ever start meetings, they would immediately start asking questions that will break your confidence down as a parent. What are you doing at home? Are they on medication? Have you taken them to a doctor? Is there something going on at home? Questioning your aptitude as a parent. And I just really didn't like that. And I was like, hold up, wait a minute. What's going on? And then I also realized another thing that the system is doing is that when it comes to our little Black boys, they like to spot check for ADHD. And what that means, everyone, is when your child is tested, they're supposed to get an array of tests. Mm-hmm. But instead of giving your child an array of tests, they're only testing them for what they have decided your child has. And what's messed up about that is, let's say your child does have ADHD. Let's say that's what the test says. How does that ADHD affect your child's aptitude and ability to learn? Because they didn't do the array of tests. They only focused on the ADHD. They cannot put anything together to help your child. What they're going to do is going to give them a 504 and say it's a behavior problem. But as a parent, you don't know that, because what do they say? What do they say to you? Well, we noticed that he's having problems, so we're going to give him a test. You're like, oh my goodness, thank you so much, because I was worried. And then you're wondering, like 4, 5, 10 years later, you're like, why is he behind? Well, why is he so upset? Why does it seem like he's getting worse? A child experience. How are they being treated? Are they being treated like they're the problem? You treat a child like they're the problem, they become the problem. Yeah. That's their experience. That's what they feel like you are expecting of them. you know, and that's like one of my things is like for my joyful planner is cohesively putting down what everyone is doing for the day, because I was getting confused. Okay. Making sure you take care of yourself, making sure that you have connection every day. Give yourself accolades for the one thing that worked. Because as a parent, period, you have days where you be like, I suck as a parent. You just be like, I suck. Because it's human nature not to focus on the positive. We focus not on what we've done, but what we haven't done. But then I also have this every day I have this journal prompt, and it helps you connect with your child. A lot of times we forget who we used to be. So it's like, okay, well, my child, like for my son, he has autism. One of the things he has a sensory disorder. So he doesn't eat. He eats French fries, nuggets, French fries, oatmeal, pancakes. And I get very frustrated. So one of the prompts is, when I was a child, I like to eat, and my son likes to eat. When I was a child, when people did blank to me, this is how I felt. When my child experiences this is how they feel. It's that moment where you begin to understand if your child has a diagnosis or not, they are bits of you. So then you can kind of connect with them in some way. I also have prompts every week for you to connect with yourself, because I lost myself for a minute. Like I really felt like a robot. So I say stuff like, play your favorite music when you were in college. I have family activities where I say, do the time machine, and you pick music from when you were kids or what you love the most, and then fast forward and let your kids pick music. And I have those like every week. So it's short connection to yourself and connection to your child, but it's something that we're missing in this busy world. COVID has helped us because we just been sitting. We've just been sitting, but now you get to be in a space of really thinking about not isolating yourself and not isolating your child. One of the things my son says on one of my podcasts is like, you don't spend time with me. And I'm like, I'm with you all the time. And he's like, well, we need to play games because we need to connect. Like we need to talk. And a lot of times as parents, especially if you're an entrepreneur, when you're working hard 9 to 5, then after 9 to 5, you got to go pick up the kids, then you go home, and then you got to cook dinner, then it's time to go to bed. It's like, I'm with you all day. But for kids, how they experience us is different. And one of the things I like to create with everybody is we're not perfect, but we can lose ourselves. We forget who we are without our kids. That changes who you are and your ability to connect with yourself, love yourself more every day. And it doesn't mean the spa. It means wash your face. It means drink some water. It means take your medication. This is like little bits of self-love. Because parents, sometimes it's not even about washing the face. Sometimes it's those little things like you don't have time to do, but it's your brand of self-care.
Right. I'm really excited about the journal, Joyful Family Planner. Well, it's more of a planner than a journal, but I like the fact that it has prompts and activities that connect family members. I'm also a little curious, Jeannie, about your other book, Not My Child. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
So, Not My Child. So this is the thing. I named it that because I have 4 kids. I have 2 stepkids and I have 2 biological children. And like I said, I'm an advocate of education equity. So my 2 older kids were like, I fought for them to get into private school. And it's not an easy task, but we did it. And for my son, they kept saying to me, we think he needs to be tested. And I kept saying, why? Because he's not failing. Right? Why? He's not failing. He's not failing. He's okay. For my daughter, I was just like, well, something's off. But when it was time for me to go to college, I was thinking to myself, DC has this fund for children who have a diagnosis. They'll actually give them $35,000 a year. I said, I'm gonna go get him tested because they said something might be off. But he had dyscalculia and executive dysfunction. And it was that moment where I was like, okay, he's still fine. But he had issues in college. So the time span was, they were telling me this about my son. My daughter was falling apart because that's he's graduating and she's like going to high school.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, I have 4-year-old. And the preschool is calling me saying, do you understand him when he talks? Right? And because my daughter was having a breakdown. And when we got her tested, she goes to school called Halton Arms. It's an all-girls school, and it is an entire culture. It is a culture where this is their life until they turn 12th grade. And to be told, this is not going to be your life anymore. I felt so bad. I felt terrible because lo and behold, all her friends, they say like for like, had ADHD. And she could not understand why they were doing okay and she wasn't. And I had to explain to her because her parents knew to test them early and I didn't know. At that point, as time progressed, I realized what happens with people with privilege. They get their children tested early because the long game is to be able to have your child take the SAT and have up to 2 days to take it. That's what a diagnosis can do for you, right? Additional time on your assignments, all those accommodations. But I didn't know. So I'm dealing with that guilt. I'm running around. At that time, I was running around trying to fix my mistake. But I think for my daughter, it was like I was running around like I was trying to fix her. So I had these 3 things going on at one time. And I'm trying to fix what's going on with her. And I'm talking to this school, trying to convince them to test my son. And then you fast forward out of that. And then I'm in the process. And it was so many different things that I did not know. And the book is called Not My Child because my journey started when I kept saying, not my child. It's not wrong with him. He's not failing. He's okay. I don't know what you're talking about. Not my child. Because whenever someone tries to tell you your child may have a diagnosis, you immediately say, not my child. Just like somebody says your child's a liar. Not my child. So that's why I call the book Not My Child. The book tells you about my journey, but it tells you, and it's like, it's not even a long read. And I did that on purpose because I want parents to read it, but I want you to come out of this book with everything that you need. So I tell you, when you look at the test, what you're looking for. I tell you, if you have this going on in your history as a during pregnancy and afterwards, this may mean that your child has a higher indication of actually having a diagnosis. I tell you what to look for with your child. I tell you how to ask and what to ask for the test. How to you're supposed to be in writing because we do, as parents, we like to be like, hey, can I get a test? No, it has to be in writing. There's a time period that they have to respond. I tell you what to look for when you get your IEP. I give you resources. Like my goal when I wrote that book was to help parents who are from this space of I think something's wrong. To actually get a very quick idea of how to make things happen for themselves. It was not gonna say it's a bad experience. I don't believe in bad experiences. And that's just for everybody out there. Listen, if something's happening to you, it's not happening to you, right? Because it's not about you, it's not personal. It's happening to you because the universe wants you to give that information and experience to somebody else. That's the purpose. So I looked at this experience as like, it's hella funky, okay? Because this should not be happening, but I want a parent to be able to pick up this book real quick, read it, and have a point of reference. You know, at this point in time, when you start your journey, there is no one to talk to. No one says, hey, you can speak to this group or that group. And to be honest, some of these groups, they go hard in the paint and they're intimidating. They're intimidating. But you shouldn't feel alone. And it shouldn't be the only person that you're in contact with to help you is the school. And even when you go to some of these advocacy groups, their attitude is like, I mean, is there a problem? Did they tell you no? Because we only come in if they tell you no. But someone could be telling you yes, but it's the wrong type of yes. You don't even know it's the wrong type of yes. You know, and unfortunately, the kids are the ones that suffer because you don't have a wealth of information, or you don't have a group to talk to. You know, you don't have, you know, anything but experience. I had an experience with a speech therapist, and she was a sister, but she literally was giving my son the bare minimum when it came to his ability to speak. I got to the point where not being paranoid, but I used my insurance. So I had outside therapy so I could make sure that they were doing what they're supposed to be doing in school. And when I came back and I told her, I said, well, he has this, and that, and I think that he needs to be having these services. She was like, oh, okay. But once again, if you don't know what to look for, you don't know what to ask. And that's why I created the podcast. So I was like, look, people need to know what to ask. I had a speech therapist come on the show, and he was talking to me about cultural competency. And I was like, well, what is that? And he was like, sometimes when people test your child, if they don't have cultural competence, they can give your child like a negative when it's something cultural. And I was like, really? Like, who knew? You know, you don't know these things. You know, so the book, that's what the book is about. That's the purpose of the book. A quick read, but it gives you bare basics. You know, everything that I do is like a quick shot. Like I even have a briefing, it's like 5 minutes of tips. I know parents are busy. I know that parents are busy, and I know that parents want the best for their kids. And unfortunately, right now, you know, be able to get something quick, sometimes it's not quick. And a lot of times people don't have time to sit and read a freaking 100-page paper or book. You know, like I don't have time for that, you know, or they don't have the conversation where you're trying to understand why your child won't sit down, or your child won't go to bed, you know, or it was working or it wasn't working, but you're by yourself, you know. And that's what the cipher is like this space where we all get to hear each other's journeys and we get to share. Because in all honesty, it was another parent's blog that made me accept my child had autism. Because when the therapist said, she was like, your son has autism, I was like, mm-hmm. And she was like, so what do you think about that? In my mind, I was saying, my child won't bang his head on the wall. And then she was like, what I want you to do is go home and read and look it up. I was like, she was like, don't look up autism, look up pervasive developmental disorder. I looked it up, you know, and I was like, no, that's not my kid. That's not my child. I had a conversation with myself. I was like, are you in denial? I was like, I don't think so. Right. But then I kept digging. I kept digging. And I came across another mother's blog, and she was doing a day in the life of her child. And I was like, oh, that's my son. I was like, that's my son all day, every day. But it took me like 2 months to find that. You know, she was like an awesome therapist. Where she would just give me gentle nudges. You know, she's like, but did you look it up? No, you know, I remember when she was trying to get him tested so she could see what his diagnosis was. She was like, I need you to take him to an occupational therapist. I was like, in my head, I was thinking, okay, but he doesn't have a job. You know, because it says occupational therapist. I was like, he doesn't have a job. So I didn't look one up. So then she kept asking, did you? I was like, man, let me go ahead and do it because I want to make sure that I'm doing what she said. So, I called my insurance like this. They said my son needs to have occupational therapy. You don't have one of those, do you? Right. And they were like, yes, ma'am. And then, I got him tested. But it was like 2 months. She had to ask me, like, we're only seeing her like once a month. So it took like 2 visits for me to call. But if you listen to my show, you will know what an occupational therapist is and what they do. I mean, it's just that space of your child is getting services or people are using different techniques. You don't know what that is. So you don't know what the expectation is. If someone's saying they're helping your child read, what program are you using? How often are you using it? Sometimes, you have an IEP, but even if your child doesn't have a diagnosis, let's say he's doing reading intervention. What kind of program are you using? How long are you using it? Go home. Look it up real quick. It takes all like maybe 10 minutes because it's like they have like the shortcut. But it empowers you to ask questions. And that's one of the things as parents that we don't have is we don't have enough information to ask good questions. So more of we're on the receiving end of whatever someone's given us. And I just feel like we just need information and resources and confidence to be advocates and for people to listen to us, especially if you're Black. I just feel like when we're Black and you're a woman, let's be clear, they chalk you up as like the angry Black woman, and
the fact that they assume that it's mostly behavior. If your kid cannot succeed, there must be something wrong that they're doing behavior-wise.
behavior-wise. And what's so slippery with that is your child could be gifted. My daughter was gifted, even with her diagnosis. She was the child, and it's also me because I'm all about academics. So my child was always on grade level with everything to the point where they were using her as a teacher. But she had this one class where we all know that you always repeat the last grades. So if you're in first grade and you always want to repeat like the first half of kindergarten, that first semester, that's just how schools go. And then you move on. But my daughter at home, I was teaching her all of everything. Like over the summer, she was doing all the workbooks. So she already knew the information. So what she would do is she would just sit there and she would just talk. She's not talking to anybody. She's just talking. And the teacher, she kept writing her up as a behavior problem. And I said to her, I was like, well, what's going on? She was like, well, she just sits there and talks. I said, well, is she doing her work? Well, she finishes her work, really quick. I said, okay. I said, well, can I send her workbooks for her to, keep herself busy? No. So you want a 4 or 5-year-old to sit there doing nothing. So she's being punished because she's on grade level. That's what we're doing. And making her behavior program. I will never forget that because I was mad because I was working on getting her a private school and you had to do a recommendation and she gave her a bad recommendation. So.
Wow, that was such a journey, Jeannie. And I think it's so generous of you to share it. Not just here, but you have a podcast that is meant to help so many people. Of course, people have to listen to the podcast. I've stressed that from the beginning. But is it possible to reach out to you directly? What if someone wanted to, let's say, have a session with you, pick your brains? Is that something that you offer?
Yes, you can go to the parentingcipher.com and I have sessions. In a couple of weeks, I'm starting the Parenting Cipher pod where I have 10 parents and we work towards a goal each session. So our first session is working on IEPs so that you're ready for your next meeting. During the summertime, it's going to be all about, creating the best summer experience for your child, also making sure that they're retained everything that they need for the next school year. And then I'm gonna have one for the holidays, and that's just gonna be like getting your mind right, because relatives, holidays, it's stressful. That one is gonna be really fun for me because I'm gonna bring in specialists that are really gonna be talking about self-care. But you know, the Parenting Pod runs like 4 times a year. The first one starts later this month. And what I'm so happy about this is that every time you leave one of the pods, you have something completed and something that helps your life be a little bit easier. And we get to chat, with other parents, you know, build community. But we also do one-on-ones as well. And I do a little bit of everything. So, you know, just, get one of my discovery calls. And if you want to talk about getting your child in a private school, we can talk about that. If you want to talk about your home life, we can talk about that. If you think your child needs to be tested, you know, we can talk about that. And if you want to talk about college, we can talk about that. That is my gift. I have kids at this point. My oldest just turned 26. So 26 to 9. So I have 25 years of all the things. And I'm always about saving $1, but getting the best education.
Stories to share too.
I do. But I'm about your child, you being able to give your child the best education possible that they deserve and that you deserve without having to pay money out of your pocket. One of the things I found for us is that because we always worried about money, some things we don't even consider for our kids. You know, private school, oh, I can't afford that. Well, I say, do you have a Lamborghini? Do you have a Porsche? No, you don't. You can get your child in private school and you don't have to pay. Because according to them, if you're not driving a Lamborghini or Porsche, you poor. and that's a fact. And they're like, really? I'm like, really? And guess what? If your child has a special needs, you don't even have to pay a dime. All you have to do is be able to advocate, baby. Keep your records, advocate, and know what to say. That's it. It's always about proof. And one thing as parents is we're busy, and no one ever sat down and told you that if you want anything for your child, special needs wise, you always had the opportunity to get them into a private school. But the difference between the person who does, outside of color, let's be clear, outside of color, you getting your child in a private school and not is knowledge, but the other piece is keeping your records. Because when you want to go get a lawyer or you want to go to an advocacy group, the first thing they're going to ask you is, where's your history? Let's be honest, man. Like, we be having paperwork all over the place. I remember at one point I would get like IEPs and I would just be like, so once I really started taking courses and got myself together, I come on every meeting. I have like a binder like this thick and I put on the table, boom, and I open it up. But it helps me advocate because I can say, like, 2 years ago, this is the same goal. This the whole, it's just that thing that empowers you. I had one lady, she would laugh every time I would come in the room and I would put it on the table because she was like, yeah, I would be thinking to myself, she didn't come to play. She didn't come to play, and it's like I said, it's just important. I just want parents, anything that you want to give your child, any dreams that you want to have for your child, I want to help you make them come true. One of the things I say about one of my courses is that your child is your dream or your business, and your vision. Your child is your vision, right? Now, if you're a business person and you want to build a multi-millionaire company, right? You can't do it by yourself. So you have people in the room to help you make that come true. Do you know what everybody does? You don't. But what you do know is that this person can do that and this person can do that, and you have your vision. Your child is your vision. And everybody at that table is supposed to help you make your vision come true. So what you have to understand is to use your speech therapist, this is what you do. You're a special education coordinator. This is what you do. And you have to know what they say so that you can hold them accountable. So instead of you sitting there letting someone else tell you what your vision is, and if you're able to reach it, you are in charge of that. You're telling them, this is my expectation, this is my vision, and this is what I want you to do. You know, you walk in that space, it's called walking to an IEP like a boss. You're the boss. You're the boss until your child becomes around 16 and they sit in the meeting themselves. And hopefully, if you're working with me or you're working in that space, your child knows how to advocate for themselves. Your goal as a parent is that when your child turns 18, that they're self-sufficient. And you should never have a moment where you ask yourself, did I do a good job? And then you can't say yes, not because you didn't have the desire, just because you didn't know. You know, but even with that being said, I'm gonna throw this in there. I mean, once your child gets to be around 25, 26, I mean, it doesn't matter what you did, they need to sort themselves out. Sort yourself out. It's time to grow up, because we all know parents have done something. All our parents have done something where we're like, man, why didn't you do better? But they can only do what they know.
Right. Jeannie, thank you so much for stopping by and giving us all those gems. I mean, that was incredible. I commend you for what you do and the help that you provide those parents. It's awesome. I admire you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I admire you. I tell everybody about you. You gotta grab her bunch. You gotta watch the show. You gotta watch the show.
I hope you will come back. I really hope you will come back, because we only talked about certain things. We talked about your story. We talked about some of your experiences with your own kids, but there's so much more to discuss when it comes to parenting special kids, special needs kids, because our kids are all special, of course.
Right.
So I hope you will come back and tell us a little bit more.
Anytime. It has been so awesome. I've been waiting for this for like months.
Thank you again, and until next time.